Path of building. Path of building. Setting aside how you might feel about a third party program being necessary to play a game, there's really no denying that if you want to enhance your understanding, your gameplay experience, your character power, there is really no more important tool than path of building. But it doesn't exactly come with a manual, and there's a lot going on here. So, for those of you who maybe haven't used it before or only have used it in a limited capacity, let's cover some of its basic functions and how to make it work to do what we need. So, what even is it exactly? At its most basic, Path of Building is a program for simulating a Path of Exile character in its entirety, telling you all the important stats about it, from its exact numerical damage to its percent chance to block, the amount of mana reserved by your skills, the number of life per second that you regenerate, everything. It is both more accurate than the in-game tooltip, and it includes a lot more information a lot more types of information than the in-game tooltip. So this program can be used to import a build from the game, from your account in the game, exactly as it is, and represent it here, which is what has already been done in this situation. It can also be used to export this build as code and share it with others. So in turn, then you could take somebody else's build and load it in here. You're not just relying on the builds that are in your account. You can load up a code of somebody else's build and take a look at it and get all of the statistical breakdown of it. You can modify the build, so you can see, okay, here's what the build looks like now, but what would happen if I took these nodes over here, or if I equipped that item, or took this item off, that kind of thing, and see how that affects your damage, your defense, and everything, which is a great way to experiment without investing the currency into experimenting in-game. You can even use this program to construct an entire character from scratch. I mean, you can build the tree, create the items, enter in the skill gems, and I'll show you how that would all work. But you can do any of those things. Use an existing build of yours, somebody else's, or even just make one from scratch to see what it would look like. So, how that would work is that the person's, either your or the person's profile would need to be set to public if you wanted to load up their POB, as it's called. So you'd have to set your Path of Exile profile to public. So how would this work in practice? Up here, which I've clicked into, is the Import Export tab. And if I were trying to import mine, now I've already set my profile to public, which you can do on the Path of Exile website. You go into settings, and this is my account name. I click start. And you could do this too. You saw my account name there. I've got it set to public. You're more than welcome. I don't know if you'll learn anything. Not all my builds are great, but you can see the full list of builds that I've currently got. And so if I wanted, I could load up. I've been playing with, which one was it? Where did it go? On brand. The Wintertide brand build that I've been fiddling around with. And I could click this. So what these buttons mean is that for the existing tree that you've got in there right now, the existing skill tree, the existing items that you've got, do you want it to just totally overwrite that, or do you want it to keep both the stuff that's already there in Path of Building plus your new things that you're importing? I'm just going to delete it because this is nothing. I mean, this is just a random build that I loaded in from PoE Ninja. And I would click load the passive tree and jewels, overwrite it, that's totally fine. And same with items and skills. So you have to do both of these things to import. Apparently there were no skills and equipment to delete because it didn't prompt me whether I wanted to overwrite them or not. Additionally, what you could do is, let's say you're on PoE Ninja or Reddit or anywhere like that. Somebody can share with you their Path of Building code. Like this right here. This is the long alphanumeric string of seemingly random letters that represents a build in Path of Building. And so from any PoE Ninja build, I could just take this random person who I found and say, hey, how did you build your Inquisitor? This page tells me some things, tells me some useful things, but you might want to get the full stat details. So you'd click here to copy, and then you would paste it in there. I just hit Control V on my keyboard to paste, and it checks it. It says, is this a reasonable, valid POB code? It is. And you could click Import. And it did. This is that person's Righteous Fire build. And it overwrote everything that I had, which is totally fine. I hadn't saved anything. That's okay. And you can do this with anything. Additionally, if you don't have the full POB code, what some people do, because it's more convenient, is they will host that code, because it's like pages of gibberish. They'll host it on a website called Pastebin. And if you just enter the URL for the Pastebin site, which is going to be much shorter than the full POB code, you can just enter that URL here, which is often how people will post it to Reddit. And it will read that just as well, and it will import it just the same. So that works too. And of course, you need a way, if you want to share your build, to do this in reverse, to generate the code. So this build, which I've imported, let's say I were to change it up. Let's say I were to get rid of all this, so I no longer have that cluster jewel set up, and I don't know, I'm going to use the search box, another feature of Path of Building, and I'm going to search for fire. Because I'm looking for some fire nodes if I'm too poor to afford cluster jewels. And so this is just a random change. I'm going to come over here, and we're just going to take some of these nodes here. And so we've made this change. Obviously, I have no idea whether this would be a reasonable, smart thing to do. I'm not really thinking about it. But just to demonstrate, we could then save this as our own build. This is the act of saving it locally. You're saving it as a file, just like a Microsoft Word file or anything else you might save to your desktop. Doing this does not share it with anybody. It just makes it available if you wanted to come back to it. But this is an important step that you must take. You have to save it locally if you want to export it. If you don't save it locally before exporting it, all you're going to be generating here is the code for a blank POB. Anybody who tried to load it wouldn't see anything. So you've got to save it and then generate the code. And this is the full code right here, which is, if I scroll over pages and pages and pages and pages. But you can also simply generate it as a Pastebin link and share this instead, which is only this. Very short. Ta-da! And you can link that to anybody. And so that is how you would either load a build in or generate a build to give to somebody else. But what does it actually do once it's in Path of Building? What can you do with it? What does it tell you? So let's start with this over on the left. This is one of the most important features. It is a summary sheet telling you some of the most key statistics of the build. The total DPS right here, the combined total DPS of whichever skill you select up here. So Righteous Fire tends to run 2 main damage dealing skills. Fire Trap is 1. So that's selected, and apparently it's doing 5 million damage. You can also come up here and select Righteous Fire instead, and we see that that is doing 1.1 million damage. Great. It tells you about the attributes, and importantly, if the build that you have loaded has fewer attributes than you need to actually run the build, so if the requirements of the items or the gems are higher than what you've got, it will tell you that. It'll tell you how much more you have to get. I think this is likely because the gems that you remember, I unequipped some of this. I'm sure there was dexterity somewhere here. Perhaps. Not sure. In any event, it tells you about your attributes. This is a new section that didn't always exist. It attempts to approximate what the largest hit you could take of varying damage types based on your resistance to it. So you have physical resistance in the form of armor and other physical damage reduction. You've got the 3 elemental resistances and chaos resist. And it just tries to tell you, all right, what is the max hit you could take of that damage type? It may not be perfectly accurate, but it gives you a ballpark idea. Then we move on to some sections that have been here for a long time. These have always been here. Life, mana, reserved mana, which is very good to know. Apparently something about what we've done here has reserved too much mana. That can sometimes happen if there are skills that you are not using, but you have active here, so Path of Building thinks you are using. You could come here and uncheck Skitterbots, a skill that reserves mana, and you can see that the reserved mana has changed because you're saying, nope, I'm not going to have that active, so it assumes that we have the mana available. It also shows, very important for a Righteous Fire build, how much net life regeneration and energy shield regeneration do you have. Since Righteous Fire is constantly degenerating your life and energy shield, you need a certain amount of regen to counter that, and this is telling you all about that. It tells you your total energy shield, armor and evasion rating, block chance, very important. Builds that focus on block, this is great to have right at your fingertips, and it shows you your resistances and your movement speed modifier. This is all the at-a-glance summary. There are some more details, though. So here, I apologize, didn't go into full details here. These are just your skill gems, and it is taking all of this into account when it is calculating your damage. It is taking a look at the auras you've got on, the links, the supports that you've got linked to your main damage dealing skills, and it's incorporating all of that into the math of the build. The items, too, are all being incorporated. Every one of the items here, you can craft a new item, which it'll ask you kind of what type of item it is, and you can add the stats to it and create a kind of custom item. It can be a real item that you have in game, or it can be just something that you're making up, something that you are pretending, okay, what if I found this, or what if I bought this? Additionally, if you are in game, you can hover over an item and click Control-C on your keyboard to copy it, just like you were copying something, again, in Word, in Excel, wherever, in an internet browser, and you can come here to create custom and paste it into this box. It will read, the game will read the stats of the item and paste it in here. That is a very handy function for copying something over that, instead of reloading the entire build. One important thing to note, when you are looking at an item, if you see a stat that is in red, like 13% of damage taken recouped as life, or 9% experience gain of gems, or when you kill a scorched enemy to burn each surrounding enemy, things like that, if they are in red, Path of Building is telling you, hey, I don't know what that means. I can't interpret that. I can't include that in your damage or defense or whatever it is. It is not familiar with what that means. Now, sometimes, like in Ashes of the Stars, the experience gain is not going to figure into your damage in any way. But for something like Legacy of Fury, the boots, with this burn a surrounding enemy, you need to account for the fact that Path of Building is not incorporating that. You need to figure that into your mental calculations. So this is the items tab. This is a very important tab in Path of Building. This determines a lot of your damage and defense and so forth. Before we get to the final calculations page, there is one other important thing other than your tree, your skills, and your items that is going to figure into your damage, and that is the configuration page. This is super important. This is where you, the player, will input the things that you believe are going to be active in a given scenario. People can use this to overinflate their Path of Building damage and make it look higher than it's going to really be in practice. For example, if there are modifiers that you only get when you kill an enemy, and if you say the enemy that I'm currently fighting is a boss, so I say, yes, it's an uber pinnacle boss. Well, you're not going to have killed an enemy recently, so you really shouldn't be checking the box for, yes, I killed an enemy recently. But you can. I mean, that's what this is for. This is you decide what you think the circumstance is going to be. So if you're a character who's wearing Tailwind boots, where every time you deal a critical strike, you have Tailwind, you can probably safely check the Tailwind box. If you're a champion and you're using Petrified Blood and you have a reliable way of activating Adrenaline, you can probably check yes, you have Adrenaline active, that type of thing. But just use your discretion. Think about when those things would be active and the type of situation that you're trying to simulate, and don't do it if it's not likely to be active at that time. So this is all incorporated. Everything you see on this page is incorporated with your items, your skill gems, and your skill tree, and it appears in this calculation tab. Now this can look a little intimidating when you first start out, so just a quick tour here. front and center, middle of the pack here, is where you're going to see your damage and how it is being calculated. It can take a little bit of getting used to, but it is super important, and it is really cool that it is finding your base damage, the number of modifiers you have that are increasing the damage, and you can click on it and see where are these coming from. A jewel, a ring, another ring, various nodes on the tree, and it even shows you which nodes on the tree they are. Your weapon. The full breakdown. This is really important when you are looking at somebody else's build and you're trying to figure out, all right, why are they dealing so much more damage than me? You want to come here. This is what's going to tell you where they're dealing more damage. Look for, I only have 400% increased damage and they have 600, or more damage, which, as you probably know, this is a more multiplier. You take everything else, you take all the increased damage, and you get one value, and then you give it even more after that. So if you were to only have 60 here and they had 82, that's going to be a big difference. It additionally will tell you if it is a skill that can crit, it will tell you about your crit chance and your crit multiplier and everything like that. Now, Righteous Fire, not a skill where you care about crits, but if it were a different skill, you could come and look right here. Attack and cast rate, this is really important for cast on crit builds. You need to know your exact attack rate down to the 0.01 to make sure that you don't go over any breakpoints. Not really the point of this video, but just to let you know that you can look right here. A ton of information. Explore this. Over here, you get some additional non-damage information about your character. What is contributing to your life? Here's your base life, just the number of flat values. You're getting 400, you're getting 100 here, 90 there, 20 there. And then you're increasing that by a certain percentage. A lot of values from your tree. You're getting some additional increase from your items, like the 8% increased on this ring. This particular build is not getting any more multipliers to their life, but theoretically you could be, and it comes out with your total amount of life. Same with mana, same with energy shield. This is great because you can click on it, and again, whether it's your build or whether you're comparing to somebody else, you can see how and why and where those values are coming from, and you can figure out where is the most bang for your buck. You look at somebody else, you've only got 800 energy shield. You want 2,000 like this guy has. How do you do it? Where is it coming from? You click here. You see he's getting a lot from his body armor and a ton from his shield. Great. You're also seeing that he's got increased. He maybe took more on his tree in terms of increased energy shield. He doesn't have any more multipliers, but he could have. And so you would look at that, and then you can think, okay, maybe I should look into getting a shield with more energy shield. Maybe I should look into more tree investment. You can get an idea of approximately how much each thing contributes to that value, in this case, energy shield. And I think that's about it. The same thing really applies to everything here. So your resistances, same deal. You can see where your resistance amount and your max resists are coming from. Your attributes up here. Everything follows the same rules. You click on it and you can see what the sources of those numbers are. Your spell suppression. And so this is really where Path of Building shows its strength. This right here lets you get the breakdown and understand what do you need to do differently to make your build better. This is why you'd use Path of Building. So that is all I've got for this video. I really appreciate you tuning in. Everybody take it easy.